Chapter 20. In 1957, a special military base was built in the desert outside Santa Rosa, California. It was named Fort Dreyfus after the important general who had come up with the idea for it while flossing his teeth. The base was meant to be a secret research station for unidentified flying objects, or UFOs. But since none of the scientists working at Fort Dreyfus had ever seen a UFO, they found themselves bored rather quickly. Having a good idea and then making it work don't always go hand in hand. One night, however, a brilliant flaming object fell from the sky above Santa Rosa. It plummeted, page 390, to Earth, striking a sand dune and destroying a soda stand called Curly Sue's. Within minutes, a team of Army scientists rushed out to the impact crater. They wore top-secret protective suits that had numerous hoses and nozzles, none of which actually did anything. They certainly looked impressive, though. As the smoke cleared, a man stepped from the wreckage. He was handsome, tall, with a shock of brown hair. He was also naked, but everyone fails to mention that when they tell the story. A few years after the fateful night, the U.S. government flattened Fort Dreyfus and made it into a drive-in movie theater. A few decades after that, the Santa Rosa Zoning Committee decided to turn the crusty old eyesore into a trailer park. They named it Crater Park as a joke. More than 50 years after the night he first arrived in Santa Rosa, Walter Sparrow pulled into the dusty drive of Crater Park and parked beside Fred's dented old Airstream trailer. He turned off the engine of the pickup and sat silently gazing out the window. There were many memories out there, lost in the sweeping dunes, buried. The vast yawning craters seemed to swallow them up. Miss Brennick's rusty pickup wheezed and banged as it settled into the ruts of the sandy driveway. "And why are we at the trailer park?" asked Gene, who sat in the back seat with his iPod jammed into his ears. He hadn't said a word during the whole ride. His hood pulled up so it hid his face. "We'll be safe here," said Walter, shoving open the car door with his foot. He uttered a loud groan and stretched. "You're right," said Gene, "because no normal person would ever come here." Hopping out onto the sand, he wandered off in the direction of the Airstream. Walter chose to ignore Gene's sarcasm and sat down on the hood of the car to watch the sunset. Carpooling a family around was not something he was used to doing. He'd done a lot of strange things in his different lifetimes on Earth. He'd helped fake the Apollo 11 moon landing. He'd built the Egyptian pyramids to impress a girl. He'd even ordered and eaten the Gutbuster Bacon Cheeseburger Super Special at the Burger Shack, just because he felt like it. In 5,000 years, he'd done just about everything there was to do except run away. But he was running now. Walter knew life could get bad, but nothing could have prepared him for sitting at a stop sign and watching Gene pick at an elbow scab with his teeth. Above them, the sun descended, casting an orange light over the trailer park. Closing his eyes, Walter took a deep breath and smelled the faraway scent of someone's campfire. It had been a good life. Too bad it was all coming to an end. "What are you doing?" asked Miss Brennick. She was walking past, her arms piled high with luggage. Walter immediately moved to take the bags from her. He forced a smile. "Call me crazy," he said, "but I'm not in a hurry to go from one tight space to another. I like being out in the open. I don't get to do it all that often. Not when you're on the run." Then Miss Brennick surprised him. She sat down next to him on the hood of the truck, placing the bags on the ground. "What do you want out of all of this?" she asked. "If you get away from these bad aliens, where will you go? What will you do?" There was only one answer to this, and it had taken him a lifetime to find it. He smiled. Miss Brennick was a very pretty woman, but she had forgotten that. From the way she acted, it was clear that she felt about as lonely as Walter did. "To be honest," he said, sighing, "I just want my old job back." "What did you do?" asked Miss Brennick. "I was a guidance counselor," said Walter, laughing at how weird it sounded after all that had happened. Again, Miss Brennick surprised him. She began to nod, and to smile a little bit herself. "I bet you were good at it," she said. "You're good with Gene." If Walter had been able to blush, he would have. But his species of alien do not blush. "Thanks," he said, his smile growing wider. There was a commotion from the big silver Airstream, and the front door flew open with a squawk of its engines. The whole trailer shook as Fred came stomping down the front steps, his ponytail bouncing behind him like a pet ferret. Once he reached the bottom step, he crossed his arms, squinted hard at everyone. There were red rope marks on his wrist, and he had a fat lip. "What took you so long?" he demanded. "Everyone else is waiting for you. This safe house isn't going to guard itself." The safe house everyone kept talking about was a large cylindrical spacecraft that was buried just below the surface of Crater Park, right under Fred's old Airstream trailer. According to Fred, the ship had crash landed near the old military base back in the days when Coke still cost a dime and Doritos hadn't even been invented yet. The interior of the spacecraft was accessible through a round metal hatch that stuck up out of the desert sand like a mechanical mushroom. This entrance opened right into the living room of Fred's trailer, a fact he'd always hidden with a fraying throw rug. Once inside, a spiral staircase led down into the main corridor, which ran from one end of the ship to the other. About 30 feet in length along the way, the passage branched off into a series of smaller cabins. White lights twinkled under the floor and lit up every time you took a step. At one end of the long corridor was an infirmary, in case someone got sick. It hadn't been used in ages, and its collection of bizarre medical instruments gleamed in the light from the bright overhead lamps. A large, round operating table lay draped in white cloth. At the other end of the passage was the cockpit, where a huge dusty windshield looked out over dirt. That's the kind of view you got when you were buried 20 feet underground. Easily the coolest feature of the cockpit was the clunky metal periscope that could be raised above the surface of the sand. Through it, you had a full view of the trailer park, the crater, and the empty desert beyond. The only area of the ship that Gene was forbidden to enter was a strange room with nothing at all inside it. No chairs or a bed or a sink. It just stood there empty, like an unused phone booth. On the wall next to the doorway was a big button covered by a box of glass. It had a sign that said "Break Glass for Ejection." When Gene, his mother, and Walter moved in, they found a crowd of friends waiting for them. Nearly every cabin of the spacecraft was full. There was Arachnid Boy, Mold Man, Hip Hop Sasquatch, Fishfoot, the San Diego Dwarf, and a few other elves that Gene had never met. Even better, 3 of the cabins at the far end of the ship were occupied by Linus, Matt, Kathy, aka Crumble Bun,